Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Arnt, and I am here to discuss the topic of immigration, and more specifically, what the White House is currently doing to address this controversial topic. For most people, immigration is considered a hot topic in today's society, causing numerous debates. Americans are unsettled over the lack of action taken to address illegal aliens in this country. However, this presentation will show you that provisions are being taken to address such issues. An overview of my presentation. Mistake. The following is an overview of my presentation and the topics that I will be discussing more in depth. I will define immigration, talk about two of the most important recent acts, discuss the I-9 verification forms, including the enforcement and penalties to the employers. I will also discuss what an I-551 is, show a video clip from the White House discussing immigration, and then explain the current immigration reform for 2013 by the Obama administration. Immigration law. Before discussing immigration law, we must first understand what immigration actually is. So, the true definition of immigration is the process of coming to live permanently in a country that is not your own. Until the late 18th century, there were no immigration laws in the United States. Until 1790, when the first act was passed, titled the Naturalization Act of 1790. This act provided the first rules to be followed by the United States in the granting of national citizenship. This law also limited naturalization to immigrants who were so-called free white persons and of good character. Currently, roughly 12 million illegal immigrants live in the U.S. This number is constantly growing year after year, which is why immigration is a major topic amongst Americans. Many provisions are currently and have been made since to exclude certain groups along with the law itself, which is why immigration reform is at the forefront, or one of the issues at the forefront of the Obama administration. Currently, as I mentioned, there are the most recent mistake. As I mentioned, there are two acts passed. Mistake. Now we move on to the immigration acts themselves. The two most recent immigration acts are the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 and the Immigration Act of 1990. The Immigration Act of 1986 provided amnesty to certain groups, while also holding employees accountable for hiring those illegal aliens. Now, there are penalties involved with these actions, which I will discuss. Sanctions can be placed against employers who hire, recruit, or refer for a fee someone not authorized to work in this country. An employer who violates the law by hiring an unauthorized alien is subject to substantial penalty. The employer can be fined for each unauthorized worker based on 3 categories. These categories are the first offense, a second offense, and any subsequent offenses thereafter. For the first offense penalty, the employer may be fined up to $2,200 for each unauthorized worker. For the second offense, the fine increases from $2,200 to $5,000 for each unauthorized worker. And finally, any subsequent event over 2 more than doubles the fine from $5,000 to up to $11,000 for each unauthorized worker. Now, granted, this is on a case-by-case basis, and the judge will review all information and will then issue a fine. Criminal penalties on the employer could include possible imprisonment up to 10 years for engaging in pattern violations. So if these offenses are repeated multiple times, getting to the subsequent offenses stage, the employer can be criminally charged with up to 10 years imprisonment for those actions. Moving on to 4 years after is the Immigration Act of 1990. And this limited the number of visas issued to illegal aliens. Mainly mistake. Moving on to the Immigration Act of 1990, which was passed 4 years later. The Immigration Act of 1990 included placing caps on the number of visas that were issued to immigrants each year. Most visas are set aside for persons of extraordinary ability, which includes scientists, doctors, anyone who we would classify as providing a benefit to our society, or where services are lacking, those individuals can step in and provide a service. To be hired, these individuals must submit a petition to Immigration Services, which is then reviewed and will be passed or denied based on certain circumstances. The next topic is I-9 forms and what is called an I-551. An I-9 is also labeled as employment verification forms. The I-9 forms must be completed by new hires within 3 days of starting work. So, when the employee is hired, the I-9 form must be completed within the first 3 days that employee has worked. If not, the employers can be charged with perjury because the employer is required to attest under the penalty of perjury that the employee is in the U.S. legally, therefore is legally allowed to work for that company. The I-551, also known as the Alien Registration Receipts, is also better known to most of us as the green card, or a properly stamped foreign passport. There are 4 different names for this. We better know the I-551 as a green card. Workers must be self-authorized to work. By mistake. Workers must be self-authorized to work, which can be completed through this I-551 alien registration receipt. The alien must then become a lawful permanent resident or has a valid employment authorization document, which could be a passport or any other permanent legal documents. The following video clip from the White House discusses briefly immigration and ways the Obama administration is addressing this issue. Hopefully you will enjoy. After mistake. The video that you just watched has some very important key statistics. Immigration reform will increase real gross domestic product by 3.3% in 2013, or an equivalent of $700 billion. 10 years after, in 2033, GDP will increase by 5.4%, or the equivalent of 1.4 trillion, which means that new steps and procedures that are being analyzed and implemented by the Obama administration will cut down on the illegal aliens in this country, making them U.S. citizens, which allows them to work and pay taxes, which will overall increase the economy, overall help the economy. By this immigration reform, everyone will be required to pay the same taxes. So just as U.S. citizens, illegal aliens will be required to become a citizen and thus will be taxed on the same basis as our ordinary day-to-day people. This will help reduce the deficit by an astounding $850 billion over the next 2 decades. The immigration reform will also boost demand for goods and services, which translates more demand for labor is more jobs. So the more demand for labor, we can bring in these illegal immigrants. Mistake. Boosting demand for goods and services. More demand. Mistake. Since the immigration reform will increase real GDP, requiring everyone to pay the same tax, this will boost demand for goods and services. So more demand for labor with the increased amount of people in the United States increases the jobs, which will overall increase the GDP in the United States. Moving on to the specifics discussed in the video, I would like to talk about the Immigration Reform Act of 2013. There are currently 4 major parts to President Obama's plan. The first mistake. Moving on, I would like to discuss the Immigration Reform Act of 2013. There are currently 4 major parts to President Obama's plan in addressing immigration through this Reform Act. The plan has the following 4 main parts, which I will discuss in more detail. To strengthen border security, streamline legal immigration, earn citizenship, and employers and hiring undocumented workers. The first category or part of this plan is to strengthen the border security. President Obama's proposal is to strengthen U.S. border security through patrol. Increasing border patrol will allow less and less illegal immigrants to sneak across borders. Strengthening border security also helps to enhance infrastructure and technology. Enhancing the infrastructure at places of entry with the help of technology to secure the borders. So using our updated technology to provide ways of catching these illegal immigrants is key to strengthening border security. The second part of President Obama's plan is streamline legal immigration. Currently, families are separated. One family member might be a U.S. citizen while his mom, dad, brother, sister are back in their country and cannot move over to the U.S. Oftentimes, families are split. President Obama wishes to keep families closer together. This being said, his proposal raises the existing country caps from 7 to 15%, which states that mistake. Oftentimes, families are split. President Obama wishes to keep families closer together, and by doing so, this will raise the existing country cap from 7 to 15%, increasing the amount of legal citizens that are coming in to the United States. Currently, there are many barriers for immigrant entrepreneurs to become U.S. citizens and thus create businesses in the United States. The President's proposal would allow those entrepreneurs to attract U.S. financing to practice. If the immigrant entrepreneurs can get financing in the United States to start the business, they will then be allowed to start the business. The third category is earned citizenship. Obviously, the main issue with immigration is legal citizens. And the two main points under the earned citizenship portion of this Immigration Reform Act is undocumented workers and paying taxes. The President's proposal provides undocumented workers a legal way to earn citizenship. This way, the immigrants can pay their own taxes, which they are currently not doing if they are illegal. Since the immigrants are here illegal, they can claim all of their paycheck. They are not paying the taxes, which is a big issue. The final category, or the final portion of the Immigration Reform Act, is employers and hiring undocumented workers. The two main points in this portion are business accountability and verify the legality of the documents. The Obama administration wishes to crack down on the employers more, especially those employers who knowingly do so. Therefore, the business is accountable, which is very important. Improving the immigration courts will allow judges to better process current and future cases. So by reforming immigration, updating the law if need be, and updating our courts, the United States can better hear and try immigration cases for the current and future. The administration also wishes to implement a government database in which employers can verify and check the legality of the documents that their employees are submitting. This will ensure that the employer is following all steps in case a government agency would come and audit the paperwork, that everything is up to date and essentially legal. I would like to thank everyone for listening to my presentation on immigration. I discussed what immigration was, some of the important acts. We watched a video on the White House and what the Obama administration is currently doing about immigration reform. And I discussed more in depth some of the major points in the immigration reform of 2013. So in closing, I would like to leave you with this statistic and piece of information. More than 40% of current Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or a child of immigrants. Of this 40%, they employ more than 10 million people. And of those 40%, mistake. In closing, I would like to thank you all for watching. Mistake. In closing, I would like to thank you for watching my presentation on immigration, in which I discussed what immigration is, some of the acts. We watched a video on the White House and what the White House is currently doing about immigration, and I discussed more in depth the immigration reform of 2013. I would just like to leave you with this little statistic and piece of information. More than 40% of current Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or a child of an immigrant. Of this 40%, of this current 40%, they employ more than 10 million people, and these companies generate revenue of $4.2 trillion. Thank you again for listening to my presentation, and I will now be available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.